Greetings, everyone. This is the second part of the series dedicated to Prophet Muhammad's policy making to reform a society that had catastrophic circumstances prevailing. It is imperative to have a look at that catastrophe and the geopolitical environment in which the Quran was revealed as a guidance for a social and political reform to understand what features of a society are counted as deviation from peace by the Quran. We are highly thankful to Mr. Muhammad Salim Abdi, an academic and educationist, for his intellectual contribution for this series of podcasts. We recall from the previous podcast that the Quran asserted the execution of this process, the reformation process, in Surah Jummah, verse 2, that we are taking forward as a signature tune of this series. This process of reformation was, as it is said in the ayah, يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَإِنْ كَانُوا مِنْ قَبْلُ لَفِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. This last part indicates the need for reformation. مِنْ قَبْلُ لَفِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ, when they were completely disoriented or strayed. From what? From the path of peace, described in the earlier part in terms of three features that a civilized society or an Islamic society should have. Islam means peace, and the Prophet had to cultivate this into the society by Yatlu alayhim ayatihi, explain the footprints of God around in nature, its balanced implementation, and its potential for research and development. Tasghir-e-Kainat. In today's language, this is called STEM teaching. The second role of the prophethood was yuzakkihim, purifying the thought process. That is, developing the concepts of honesty and truthfulness which leads to justice. And it was absent. In today's language, this is called social science education. The third responsibility of the Prophet was يُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ, teaching the book he brought in depth and training for insightfulness, logical thinking. The last part of the verse is وَإِنْ كَانُوا مِنْ قَبْلُ لَفِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ, which confirms that all of the above features were non-existent. Today, we will try to dig out how these features were non-existent and needed reformation. Let's look at the political situation first. There was actually no political organization such as parliament, law, court, or police anywhere in the Arabian Peninsula except Yemen. The entire Arabian desert consisted of different tribes. Arabs did not entrust any authority. The only authority they entrusted was that of the chief of their clan. Even this authority was not considered political. It was more moral, as the chief of the tribe was respected because of his character and of his authority and superiority. You might see it even now at various places in various forms. Since there was no political organization, lawlessness was ruling. If a person committed a crime, the aggrieved party would take the law into their own hands and try to achieve justice through a more heinous process than the said crime. As a result, the flames of hatred, enmity, and revenge were passed on to generations, passing on a never-ending series of wars between people and between the tribes. Since there was no law, no court, and no police, everyone looked towards their clan for protection in exchange with loyalty to the clan. This can also be seen today, where people are more protective of the ongoing traditions of their communities to get favors when needed, even in societies who claim to be Muslims. The Quran calls this an uncivilized feature and a complete deviation from Islam. War was the only exciting, though a terrifying hobby for Arabs. The clang of swords pacified their souls. This hobby offered them opportunities to test their combat tactics and display their valor and skills. This is how they used to expand their and their clan's popularity and achieve a status in the tribe. Perpetual peace meant a worthless life to them. Hence, continuing war is another feature of a nation that is far from education and sensibility, that is, far from Islam. Except for a few large cities and scattered small permanent settlements, all the Arabian Peninsula was maliciously ruled by nomadic Bedouins to a greater degree. These people were a pool of consistent harassment and a threat for the permanent settlements. They raided and robbed the settlements whenever they wanted. Trade convoys were also not safe from their invasions, except if they had their own ultimate safety arrangements. Therefore, most of the inhabitants and traders had to obtain protection from them in exchange for some allowance, like bhatta. This shows the absence or non-functionality of political structures. The Quran had declared this 1400 years ago as features of an uncivilized and un-Islamic society. As far as the economic situation is concerned, the economy of Arabs resided in raising cattle, including sheep, goats, camel, horses, and donkeys. Farming, wherever arable land was available. Trading, interest-based lending, and slavery to control the costs for labor. Mecca and Yathrib were two major business hubs in Hijaz province. In Yathrib, the Jews dominated the economy. A large part of the best cultivable land was in their hands. They were also good farmers and had a control over most industrial and craft businesses as well that the resources of that region produced. They had a monopoly on armaments too. Apart from the Jews, the Arabs of Yathrib also earned their livelihood by farming. Besides, they also pooled in the industry and crafts. The capitalists of Quraysh were merchants and traders. In summer, their trade caravans mostly traveled to Syria, Iraq, and Egypt, and in winter to Yemen. These people used to export hides, raisins, and silver, and returned with cooking oil, perfumes, industrial and handicraft products, spices, and gold. The departure and return of the trade caravans in Mecca was celebrated. The caravan included thousands of camels, horses, donkeys, and hundreds of slaves. Not only the capitalists and merchants used to invest in the trade caravan, but also the middle class people used to take loans from the capitalists and invest to try their luck. The high interest lending and economic slavery can even be seen today at many places, including those who claim to be Muslim regions. The Quran clearly calls this feature as disorientation from Islam. Interest-based trading was an important component of the Arab economy. Investors used to charge huge interest on loans, usually 100% and sometimes 200 and 400%. The increasing interest rates made the lender richer and the borrower poorer. The Quran mentions this in Surah Al-Imran, verse 130, specially addressing it as those who believe. Do not inflate usury. Stay honest to God so that you flourish. Slavery was an important outcome of this tradition. The physical labor required to drive the economy was obtained from slaves. Slave men and women were bought and sold in the markets like sheep and goats. Maids not only performed domestic work but also fulfilled sexual needs. Slaves and maids were the most marginalized and oppressed class of the Arab society. These features are known to be there even now, in different forms.
and are declared in the Quran as a complete deviation from Islam and a crime in a civilized and an Islamic society.
Collective thought is of fundamental importance for the economic and social development of any society, which is not possible without human solidarity. This concept was absent in Arabian Peninsula. They were devoid of this human unity because there was no political organization, while the neighborhood of the Arabian Peninsula had two large monotheistic nations, the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire, and they were highly developed economically and socially. Arabs, on the other hand, were compulsive drunkards and gamblers. They used to swear and utter reckless words and did not hesitate violence on their swearing and uttering. Moral responsibilities were also totally absent. The Quran called this feature of a society as Zalalum Mubin, totally uncivilized and un-Islamic.
Males were rulers of the society, and females were no more than a labor, sexual, or a property item. There was no restriction on the number of spouses. Sons inherited their father's wives, except their own mother. In a battle between two clans, the men of the defeated clan were killed, and the women were appointed as maids. Women who had no source of income earned their livelihood through prostitution. Women neither had a share in the property of their father or husband, nor did they have any respect in the society. Oblivious honor was popular. It was customary to bury daughters alive. Fathers who did not bury their daughters also did not oppose to the custom. In case of a woman having several husbands, the father of a child would be the one pointed out by the woman. Torturing slaves and maids or to sell or present them to anyone was the prerogative of their owner. Slaves, maids, and wives were victims of brutal violence. Torture was also done so that they would not even think of running away or rebelling. If any such thing exists in a society, the Quran has called it Zalalum Mubin, completely deviated from Islam. In terms of education, Arabs were as literate as a pinch of salt and flour. They did not like literacy. However, they were very proud of their eloquence of their language. Their poets used to write eloquent poetry on countable topics that excited the warriors of their clan against the enemy through their poetry. 7 eloquent poetries are quite famous, which were once displayed in the Kaaba, for which they believed no one could be at their power. These two features of a society are also attributed as far from a civilized or an Islamic ideology.
Our discussion today revealed the pre-existing conditions of a region that needed social reform for peace, which is called Islam in Arabic. The absence of these reforms are poor education and research, poor social and justice system, poor insightfulness, emotional belief. The Quran calls this Zalalim Mubin, a clear disorientation from peace, that is, a clear disorientation from Islam. These features are very typical to the society that the Quran calls disoriented. In the next podcast, we will look at the reforms that Prophet Muhammad tried to embed from social and political points of view to cultivate peace or Islam.
And in the end, I will take this opportunity for a gentle reminder that this channel is an effort to think out of the box of the traditional mindset about the God, religion, mankind triangle, and widen the span of questions that consistently arise in the thinking minds. So please subscribe, share, and leave constructive feedback to make it better. Thank you so much for listening to me.